We found it. We found it. Is it one or two? I think that's what it was. Good morning. I'd like to welcome you all a little dough. Brother Jackie Woodby, if you would, open us up in a word of prayer. Once more, good morning. We walk through life with worries and cares for what tomorrow may hold. We will prepare our storehouses and cupboards with the concern that there may be a time we're not able to go out and obtain food to feed our families. We will stockpile fuel and oil to make sure that we have enough commodity to fuel our machinery for when the price of gas gets too high. And it seems to be, as the older and older we get, we tend to pack and store more and more things, including, in a lot of our cases, junk. And often enough, I'll make the joke, you just can't throw away good junk. You never know when it'll come in handy. But we prepare that for what's to come. We hold on to that stuff in hopes to prepare for what we think is to come in the following years. In most people's cases, we will tend to spend more time prepping for that worried and troubling time that we expect to face here on this side of life than we do on the other side of life. We're taught, to have a 401k and retirement funds or pensions. And if nothing else, then at least a savings account or stuffing your money in a mattress and hiding it away. But we're taught to dump 3, 6, 8, sometimes 12, and even up to 25% of our daily wages in order to put back what we earn today. So when we're old enough to retire, we can, spend that and rely on that said savings and hopefully enjoy the last 5 to 10, and maybe if you're lucky, 15 years of our lives. This is also somewhat biased on the current age of, Social Security and other retirement benefits, which seems to be ever steadily climbing up the ladder of age, to where, probably by the time I'm of coming of age, it will probably be around 80. I don't think, if at that age point, if we even make it to that point, we will be able to fully enjoy those things our younger selves set back, and that, from when we were at that time, thought it was a worthwhile investment. Most of us here will pass with a bank account or assets, more than what we could use, that its only purpose is to allow our kids or relatives to fight over. It seems to be a fairly normal human rotation cycle. We fall short with hopes of, what we didn't have or what we wanted to have, and, we leave that in hoping it provides for our children, yet oftentimes what we thought was going to be beneficial to the ones that will replace us, instead it will cause them to feud and fight against their brethren. But we look for these savings, and we sacrifice, things of ourselves throughout our early life and midlife in hopes that it will be an easier, better future. But we don't have an actual guarantee for us to be able to be around to use it. Yet, where there is an option with an actual guarantee of benefit, that benefit being eternal life in heaven with Christ, we disregard those investment strategies taught to us that will help our spiritual nest egg grow. We skip by with doing the least amount we can consciously get by with, and for some of us and most of the world, nothing at all. We are often too focused on the world's view of how we should prep for our golden years, which is not always going to come, as we are all mortal and will have accidents and ailments that come upon us. We strive for a relaxation that, if does arrive, it just lasts for a small sliver or a fraction of our life, which our life is already such a short span. Yet we continue to ignore the calling of God's promise of a retirement home, where not only will there be no pain or sorrow, but it will be an everlasting endeavor. One that will never decay. It will never need, to fix the leaky sink, but it will be perfectly maintained. Where ourselves will also be perfectly maintained. We won't hurt, but, we'll be able to rejoice in His name now with a new body, one that does not age or is susceptible to fall short to ailments or injuries. Yet we still set aside treasures in a world that does not care for you here on this side. And no matter how powerful you are or how much influence you think you may have, you will be forgotten about as quickly as you pass. Even someone as powerful as, the Rockefeller, such impacts they've had on their life. The man Rockefeller himself, except for a few of his families, has been lost over the years. We saw the same with someone as influential on this side as, Steve Jobs with Apple. You could probably ask kids today, who was Steve Jobs, and they wouldn't have a clue. And I think we'll see the same with people like Bill Gates, Warren Buffett. These figureheads, we'll call them, will soon be lost to time, even though they were so powerful. Not powerful, but influential. James 4:14, whereas ye know not what shall be on the morrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanish away. Yet we are so focused on that vapor, this side of life, and we neglect our heavenly home, and we neglect trying to reach out into the lost to show them the retirement plan in Jesus, one that is everlasting, and a place where we will never grow old. I have heard of a land on the faraway strand, this beautiful home of the soul, built by Jesus on high, well wished never shall die. 'Tis a land where we'll never grow old, never grow old. Never grow old, in a land where we'll never grow old, never grow old, never grow old, in a land where we'll never grow old. In that beautiful home we'll never more roam. We shall be in the sweet by and by. Happy praise to the King through eternity sing. 'Tis the land where we'll never grow old, never grow old, never grow old, in a land where we'll never grow old. When our work here is done and last crown is won, and our troubles and trials are o'er, all our sorrows will end and our voices will blend, and the loved ones who've gone on before never grow old, never grow old, in a land where we'll never grow old, never grow old, never grow old, in a land where we'll never grow old. We do have one thank you card up here before I go through the announcements and forget. It's the thoughtfulness of people like you that make the world so bright. We cannot begin to thank you for your thoughts and prayers, as well as the beautiful wreaths. Love, Katie, Donna, and Chris. Graduation fellowship will be on June 1st at 6 p.m. There is a list of graduates in the bulletin. 16th through the 20th, we will be doing Vacation Bible School. Keep that in prayers. And then July 5th, the church will be doing a back-to-school bash at Wetlands Water Park. No Name But His will be singing at the evening service on August the 10th. And we've got some birthdays listed. The 25th, Arden Kuhn and Tim Lyons. The 28th, Alicia McDonald's. The 30th, Woody Lyons and James Verdun. And we have one anniversary listed, and that is Woody and Ginger Lyons on the 24th. Do we have any other birthdays or anniversaries that were not mentioned? Any other announcements that need to come before Sunday school? If nothing else, you are dismissed to your classes.
Good morning. Certainly a blessing to be able to come back to the Lord's house this morning and worship. And, this Memorial Day weekend, I hope that everybody's thought about what that means, what we're celebrating. I want to say thank you to all those that served in the military, whatever branch. Thank you for your sacrifice. The sacrifice you made, the sacrifice your families made, and for those that paid the ultimate sacrifice for our nation. They did that so that we could be here today, so that we could have the freedom to be able to worship in spirit and in truth, and to not have those freedoms taken away. And, we need to be in remembrance of the price that they paid, and be thankful to our military, those that serve. The lesson today is in Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 22. It's verses 1 through 3, and the title is The Depths of Saul's Jealousy. And, if you think about jealousy, about how even today, how it consumes people sometimes, and it can be jealousy over a spouse, or over a boyfriend or girlfriend, or over a job, what somebody else say, have a position you want. So many things fire up jealousy in our lives. And as we study through this lesson today, I think it's important for us to think about how that if we let that jealousy slip into our lives, how that it can consume us if we're not careful. It can tear us down to where that we focus upon that becomes so important to us. That thing, that resentment starts building, and it turns into anger, and it turns into hate. And sometimes it turns into violence, and it's just such a strong emotion that can overcome us if we're not careful. And as we look at this lesson, just to kind of look at what's been over the last 3 weeks, as I listened to Joe and Woody teach, and I thought about, first Samuel, he anoints David to be the next king, and, all the ones they thought would be the king, that wasn't God's choice. He doesn't look on the outside stature, but he looks on the heart. And in that second lesson, Woody taught about David and Goliath, and what a powerful example of God's power in David's faith. And to realize that, whenever God gives us a task, all we have to do is have faith, because he will prepare us for the task that he sends us to. Whatever that may be, it may seem overwhelming in man's eyes, but in God's eyes it's not, and he can provide. And then probably this is whenever Saul's jealousy probably started kicking up, Because, here was Saul, this man of great stature and a king and the leader of his people. And both him and everybody in his huge army was afraid to face the giant. But this little shepherd boy had no fear because he knew that God was with him. His faith wasn't in his abilities, but it was in God's ability to meet that need. And so, after it was all over with and they were singing David's praises, Saul, I'm sure, began to let that jealousy build in his heart. And so in that third lesson, we see that jealousy gets to where that he just wants rid of David. He starts plotting, but it's kind of undercover. It's not on the forefront. He's gonna give him his daughter in marriage, but you got to go do this thing. You got to go kill these 100 Philistines, and then you can have my daughter to wed. And so, we see how God provides. He protects David through that, and everything that Saul throws at him, God protects him. And our lesson today, it skips over chapters 19 through 21. And during these chapters, David's basically fleeing from Saul. I mean, he's come to realize the danger. And even though he's always been nothing but faithful, Saul don't see it that way. The jealousy has made him to where that he's become radical. He's almost just overwhelmed with his hate for David because of his jealousy. And we see that even, Saul's son, Jonathan, he loves David and he helps protect David, and he tries to talk to his father, and he says, Dad, he's been nothing but faithful. He's been your greatest follower. He's done everything for you. Why do you want to kill him? He's done nothing to deserve death. And the only reason that Saul gives him at one time is, well, you can't be king unless he's gone. But in reality, it was all about Saul. He just wanted rid of him because he did not want David to be able to become king. Because of Saul's evil, God's Spirit had left him, and you can imagine what a hole that left in his life. I mean, that just continued to make him even more crazy and radical in the things he was doing. And so, Jonathan struggles, I think, to even accept that his father could be trying to kill David. But in the end, they try it, they find out sure enough he is. And so, even though it skips over chapter 21, I want to read a few verses there because it kind of sets the stage for our lesson, okay? And the terrible thing that's going to happen because of Saul's jealousy. In chapter 21, verse 1, it says, And then came David to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest, and Ahimelech was afraid at the meeting of David, and said unto him, Why art thou alone, and no man with thee? So, we can see he's used to seeing David come to him, but with a group of warriors with him, and a group of people, and he's like, why are you by yourself? This isn't right. And David says unto Ahimelech the priest, The king hath commanded me a business, and has said unto me, Let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee, and what I have commanded thee, and I have appointed my servants to such and such a place. So, David deceived him. He didn't tell him the truth. And I don't think the Bible's justifying lying. I think it's just documenting what happened. It's just telling the story. And, David, what his reasons were, whether he was trying to protect himself, whether he was trying to protect Ahimelech, whatever it may have been, lying never turns out well. It just doesn't. In verse 3 it says, Now therefore what is under thine hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread in mine hand, or what there is present. And the priest answered David and said, There is no common bread under my hand, but there is hallowed bread, if the young men have kept themselves at least from women. And David answered the priest and said unto him, Of a truth women have been kept from us about these 3 days since I came out, and the vessels of the young men are holy. And the bread is in a manner common, yea, though it were sanctified this day in the vessel. So you know that bread, they would take 12 loaves of bread into the tabernacle. They would place it on the table of showbread as a sacrifice. And then every week they changed that out. And that bread was considered holy bread, and it was to be consumed by the priest that maintained the temple only. But here David's saying, you know, we're holy. Our bodies are acceptable, you know. And so in verse 6 it says, so the priest gave him the hallowed bread, for there was no bread there but the showbread that was taken from before the Lord to put hot bread in the day when it was taken away. So he gives David the loaves of showbread. Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg the Edomite, the chiefest of the herdsmen that belonged to Saul. So here we've got this guy that I think the Edomites were descendants of Esau, if I remember correctly. And so, you know, this guy here, he worked for under Saul. He was over the herdsman, so he had a position. He had people working under him. And for whatever reason, he was there at the tabernacle that day, and he sees Saul. He sees David come and talk to Ahimelech, and he sees Ahimelech provide him with the bread. Now, he probably didn't hear the whole conversation. He probably didn't know what was said, or maybe he did. You know, that's something we don't know. But we do know he was probably excited to get back and tell Saul about what had happened. And so in verse 8 it says, and David said unto Ahimelech, and is there not here under thine hand spear or sword? For I have neither brought my sword nor my weapons with me, because the king's business required haste. So again, he deceives Ahimelech. He says, I couldn't go get my weapons because I had to be secretive. I had to be very careful. Couldn't let anybody know what I was doing. So I had to slip out under cover. And the priest said, the sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom thou slewest in the valley of Elah, behold, it is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If thou wilt take that, take it, for there is no other save that here. And David said, there is none like that. Give it to me. So I'm sure that sword was very precious to the Israelites, because, you know, David had taken it as a young boy. He'd taken that sword, and after the giant had fell from the stone hitting him in the forehead, he used Goliath's own sword to cut off his head and bring it to the king. So that was a very treasured thing. And we see here that, so Ahimelech, through the deception. Now, we don't know if David would have told him the truth, maybe he would have still helped him. That's something we don't know, you know, but we do know that it was through deception that he did help him. And so that kind of sets the stage for our lesson today in chapter 22. So we'll kind of jump onto that to chapter 22, and in verse 1, kind of start off this lesson with David is trying to get out of Saul's reach and get his family out of Saul's reach and get them to protection because he fears for their lives. And so we'll start out with verse 1 of chapter 22. It says, David therefore departed thence and escaped to the cave Adullam. And when his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him. And every one that was in distress, and every one that was in debt, and every one that was discontented, gathered themselves unto him. And he became a captain over them. And there were with him about 400 men. So it's likely they brought their families. So, you know, we got 400 men. There very likely was women, children, you know, that because they wouldn't have left their families behind. They would have been fearful for them. And so, you know, there was quite a gathering here that was following David. And, you know, God had warned them whenever they kept asking for a king. He said, you know, a king will just bring you hardness. He's not going to help you. if you would just let me be your king, then you'd be a lot better off. But no, the people cried for a king. So, I'm sure now that they had heavy taxes, they were not happy with the situation now that they had their king. It just hadn't worked out the way they had thought. And so there was quite a few of them that says that those that were in distress, those that were maybe in trouble, those that were in debt, that owed money, maybe taxes they couldn't pay or whatever it may be, and those that were discontented. That covers a wide range of things right there, because there's a lot of stuff can make us discontented. But they were certainly hoping for a better life, for things to improve under David. So they determined they were going to follow David instead of staying behind Saul and supporting him. In verse 3 it says, "And David went thence to Mizpah of Moab, and he said unto the king of Moab, Let my father and my mother, I pray thee, come forth and be with you, till I know what God will do for me." So there's several things to get out of this verse. First of all, David goes down to Moab, and they are not friends. The Moab and the Israelites and the Moabites they're not best buddies. But, David was a great grandson of Ruth. Jesse was a grandson of Ruth. And so there's family ties there back to Moab, because she was of Moab. And so, there was family connections there that he thought he could go to them and get help. And the other thing, he was trying to take care of his family. So, he brings his father and his mother there. And he tells the king, "Let him stay with you till I know what God will do for me." Now, David had no doubt that God was going to come through. He was just waiting to see how. He wasn't sure yet what was going to take place. But he had faith that God was in control. And so he says, "I'm just waiting on God. I'll just protect them while I wait on God to show me what he has for me." In verse 4 it says, "And he brought them before the king of Moab, and they dwelt with him all the while that David was in the hold." So the king agreed, and they came there, and they were taken care of. In verse 5, "And the prophet Gad said unto David, Abide not in the hold, depart and get thee into the land of Judah. Then David departed and came into the forest of Herath." So the prophet Gad comes on the scene here, and he's going to be an important person all the way through David's life. I believe in chapter 2 Samuel, it talks about him being his seer. So he's his consultant, he's his guide, he's his spiritual leader, and he helps him through both this time as well as while he's ruling as king. He'll be his guide and helping him. And so a very important person in David's life. And he tells him, you don't need to stay here in Moab, or, you need to get back into Judah. You need to go back to your land. And not sure the reasons behind that at this point, but God had a plan. And he'd sent his prophet to let David know what he needed to do. And we see that he was obedient. So he departed. He went back where Gad had told him to go. And in verse 6 it says, "When Saul heard that David was discovered, and the men that were with him, now Saul abode in Gibeah under a tree in Ramah, having his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing about him. Then Saul said unto his servants that stood about him, Hear now, ye Benjamites, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards, and make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds?" So, Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin. And even though he was supposed to be the king of Israel, he apparently had selected people from his tribe for these major roles, for these, And so he certainly showed preference it appears, to his clan. And he's telling them, I've took care of you now. I've give you positions. I've made you something. But Now, David, he's from the tribe of Judah. You know, do you think he's going to honor you like I have by giving you positions and serving me and me taking care of you? And then he starts accusing them. In verse 8, he says that all of you have conspired against me. You know, these people, if they were conspiring against him, any one of them would have had many, many chances to take his life. They obviously were very loyal. But he had got so involved in his jealousy and hatred that he couldn't even see the truth anymore. He was wanting to blame everybody. Everybody was at fault. Everybody was against him. He says, there is none that showeth me that my son hath made a league with the son of Jesse, and there is none of you that is sorry for me, or showeth unto me that my son hath stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait as at this day. You just aren't sorry for me. He was really wanting some pity, wasn't he? Now, he was in a bad shape. Here he was being carried around and being king over all, and yet he thought they should feel sorry for him. And it just shows how far he had went, how much the jealousy had consumed him. It just absolutely had become his focus in life. That's all he could think about was how that David, you know, this young shepherd boy was going to take his position, going to become king, knock him off his throne, and it was everybody's fault. Everybody was to blame, except him, of course. Now, he was innocent in all this. Verse 9 says, Then answered Doeg the Edomite, which was set over the servants of Saul, and said, I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob to Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub. So here we go. He gets his chance. He says, I'm going to get on Saul's good side. I'm going to tell him what I saw. I'm going to rat him out so that he'll know exactly what's going on. And, you know, this guy, I'm sure that he was hoping for profit of his own. You know, he was hoping to get moved up and become something in the eyes of Saul. You know, what matters is how God sees us. That's what matters, not how man sees us. Verse 10 says, And he inquired of the Lord for him, and gave him victuals, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. So, you know, we don't know exactly how much Doeg knew. We don't know if he heard the conversation between David and Ahimelech, or if he just saw that he provided for him. But whatever the case, you know, it certainly, he points out that David had a conspirator. There was somebody helping him, and it was a priest. And they were at fault. They were the reason David had escaped. So in verse 11 it says, Then the king sent to Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, the priests that were in Nob, as they came all of them to the king. So, you know, here in Nob, I think it was on the outskirts of Jerusalem, if I understand correctly, but, you know, that's where the tabernacle was set up. So that's where all the priests, all the Levites that were tasked with taking care of the tabernacle, well, that's where they resided at, and they had daily chores. They took care of the tabernacle and the sacrifices and all the things that had to be done. They were there taking care of that. But Saul calls them all to him. He wants them all in front of him, not just Ahimelech, but all of them. He wants them all there. And they come. They're obedient, and they come before him just as he said. In verse 12 it says, And Saul said, Hear now, thou son of Ahitub. And he answered, Here I am, my lord. And Saul said unto him, Why have you conspired against me, thou and the son of Jesse, in that thou hast given him bread and a sword, and hast inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me, to lie in wait, as at this day? So Saul doesn't ask him what happened. He just immediately accuses him. He basically says, Here's what you've done, and I know it. You have helped David and helped him escape and helped him plot against me to take my life and take my position. And I'm basically not going to stand for it. And Ahimelech answered the king and said, And who is so faithful among all thy servants as David, which is the king's son-in-law, and goeth at that bidding, and is honorable in thy house? So the first thing Ahimelech does is he defends David. He says, Saul, you're confused. There's nobody more faithful to you than David has been. He has went at your bidding. He's done exactly what you've asked him to do. He stayed faithful to you no matter what. He's even your son-in-law. He married your daughter. And so he says, first of all, why are you wanting to destroy David? And then in verse 15 it says, Did I then begin to inquire of God for him? Be it far from me. He says, David has come to me many times and asked me to inquire of God for him. I've always done that. That's been, that's our role to do. And so, he was always faithful. He was always seeking God's will in his life. This wasn't the first time he ever came to me. And he says, Let not the king impute anything unto his servant, nor to all the house of my father, for thy servant knew nothing of all this, less or more. Ahimelech says, Saul, I had no knowledge about this. I didn't even know there was conflict between you and David. David came to me. He said, I'm on the king's mission. I'm here under the king's command. And yes, I helped him as I always have, but it wasn't my intent to plot against you. I was just doing what I thought was right. And would that make any difference to Saul? It would not. And the king said, Thou shalt surely die, Elimelech, thou and all thy father's house. So he's not going to listen to any excuse. He's not going to listen to reason, but he's going to pronounce death on all of them. Verse 17 says, And the king said unto the footmen that stood about him, Turn and slay the priest of the Lord, because their hand also is with David, and because they knew when he fled and did not show it to me, but the servants of the king would not put forth their hand to fall upon the priest of the Lord. The footman was kind of like, from what I read, was sort of like the Secret Service of today. They were the king's protectors, and whenever he was traveling, some of them would run in front of the chariot to make sure the path was clear, and some would protect his home, and wherever he was at, they were surrounding him, taking care of him, preventing him from being in danger. And yet, whenever he commands them to kill the priest of the Lord, they're not going to do it. And they say, no, that's not right. Why would we slay all these people? They're just serving God. In verse 18 it says, And the king said unto Doeg, Turn thou and fall upon the priest. And Doeg the Edomite turned, and he fell upon the priest, and slew on that day 85 persons that did wear a linen ephod. 85 priests that were just there caring for the tabernacle. And only, even if he wanted to blame someone, Elimelech was the one that had helped David, not the rest of them. But he commands them all to be killed. And not only them, it says, And Nob, the city of the priest, smote he with the edge of the sword, both men and women, children and sucklings, and oxen and asses and sheep, with the edge of the sword. They wiped the city out. They killed their wives, they killed their children, they killed their babies, they even killed their livestock, their animals. They destroyed everything. And this was where the tabernacle was, where the house of God was, and the people that were there to take care of it. And yet he commands them all to be destroyed. Can you imagine so much hatred being in someone's life that they would make a decision like that, a command like that, to kill so many needlessly? It's just hard to imagine. In verse 20 it says, and one of the sons of Elimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, and I know I slaughter these names, I apologize. It's a little bit of hillbilly and I just can't help it. But one of the sons of Ahitub named Abiathar escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar showed David that Saul had slain the Lord's priest. So one son escapes. Out of the 85 that are killed, there's one that survives. And he escapes and he comes to David. He's able to find David and come to him. And he tells David what's took place and how that the city of Nob has been totally overrun and destroyed. In verse 22 it says, and David said unto Abiathar, I knew it that day when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul, I have occasioned the death of all the persons of thy house. So, David, he admitted, he took responsibility. He said, I caused this. I did this. I was the one that went there. I was the one that asked for help. And because of that, your family has been killed. And, that's something that David would live with for the rest of his life. He would always know that slaughter was because that he went to the priest for help. Abide thou with me, fear not, for he that seeketh my life seeketh thy life, but with me thou shalt be safeguarded. As we look at this lesson and we think about the effects of jealousy and how that jealousy consumed Saul, it can very easily do the same thing to us. Jealousy is a lot like, whenever you want something somebody else has, you're either because you feel that somebody's encroaching on your right or they've got something that you deserved. So many things can cause us to become jealous, and it can happen in the church. I have seen it happen in the church where that people would be jealous of a position or of a title. Work in the church is all about serving God. It's not about a title. It's not about a name. It's not about prestige. But it's about being a servant to God and sharing the love of Christ. And that's the purpose that we have whenever we're in the church. And so a title means nothing. Not personally, but our service, being if you want to be a leader in the church, be a servant leader. You lead by example, and you share Christ, and you serve others in order that you can guide them. But to be jealous of someone else, there is no benefit in that, and it will do nothing but destroy you and tear your life down. It can drag you away from the church. It can drag you away from your Christian life. And so, as you think about it, I just hope you got something out of this lesson today. But, the only thing that matters is our walk with Christ. That's what's important. And everything else is going to fade away. But what we do for Christ, that's what's going to last for an eternity. Sorry I hadn't stopped yet. I kind of breezed right through that. Has anybody got any comments on the lesson? I'd really appreciate any thoughts. Yeah, it is. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Anybody else? That's right. Yep. Yeah, it is a slow fade sometimes. We start letting little things creep into our lives, and they grow and grow and build until they can destroy us. Jealousy. That's right. That's right. We always have to protect our witness, the things that we do, the example we set. But, people will have opinions about us that just because sometimes they're just looking for something to blame. And, that, like you said, that's between them and God. Anybody else? Well, if not, I really appreciate your attention, appreciate you being here this morning. And I'll dismiss this in prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you so much for just giving us the privilege to come and worship this morning, Lord. And we thank you for letting us celebrate Memorial Day, and for those, Lord, that has fought to give us the freedom that we can just come and worship in spirit and in truth. And we do pray, Lord, for the rest of the service. Pray for just each one that'll be here, Lord, that spiritual needs, Lord, will be met through your word being heard and drawn into our hearts, Lord, that we can just draw closer in our walk with you. And we do pray for the many that's been sick, Lord, those that are still struggling, those with cancer, Lord, going through treatments, those that's, Lord, been hospitalized. It's just, Lord, the needs are great. I'm so thankful you are a great big God. And, Lord, each thing is just a simple task to you. So we pray, Lord, you'd be with them. Pray for those that can't be here this morning, Lord, because of sickness. And just ask that you'd bless them, Lord. We do again pray for the rest of the service. Pray your will be done. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you.